Hey there! Welcome to our super fun tutorial on floats and positioning in CSS. My name is Glory and I'll be your instructor in this course. Today, we'll learn how to make our web pages look amazing by moving things around. So let's get started. First, let's talk about floats and position. These are tools that helps us place things exactly where we want them on a web page. Imagine arranging your toys on a shelf. Float and positioning helps us do just that. When you don't use positioning or when you don't understand positioning as a developer, or even if you're doing a building, so you would have things crunched up on your web page or scattered or not properly aligned. Like you see these houses here, they don't look really well built. Floats are like making things float to the left or right. Floats let elements move to the left or right? So when you float something, other items wrap around it, just like how water flows around this boat. Let's see an example. So here we have two boxes. Let me zoom it in so you can see. So we have two boxes floating to the left and right, and a paragraph wrapping around them. In my code here, you're going to notice how I have assigned the value left to the property of float. That's why this div here floats to the left of the web page. And on the second div, we've applied the value of right to the property of float. That is why this second box floats to the right of the web page. In real life, especially when you want to, have pictures on your web page with text wrapping around it, like some of you would have seen web pages with pictures and some text wrapping around it. You can float your picture to the left, or you can try to float it to the right and have text wrapping around it. Next, let's talk about positioning. Positioning helps us place things in specific spots on our web page. It's like you are sticking a sticker on a piece of paper exactly where you want it. Let's make positioning in CSS as easy as baking a cake. So think about cakes. Imagine you're designing a cake with layers. Imagine we're decorating a big yummy cake. Each layer is like a part of our web page. We can place the layers in different ways. Some stay still, some float around, and some stick to one spot. Like you see this frosting styles attached here. It's just like arranging part of a web page using CSS positioning. In CSS, we use positioning to decide where each layer of our web page should go. So there are different types of positioning. We have static, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. So let's break each and every one of them down. First, we have static positioning. So it's like you are putting a cake layer on the table right where it belongs. It doesn't move. So you're placing your cake layers just on top of each other in the order they come. It's the default. It doesn't do much in terms of special placement. Let's go into our code so that you fully understand what static positioning is. So here in my VS Code, I already have a bunch of code I've written down. I would want us to look at the static positioning. So I'm going to release the port again and I'll go live. So for static, let's quickly look at static. So for static, like what I explained before, you have this div here having a position set to static. You can see it in the code we have here. Let me navigate to where we have static. So inside of here, you can see that I have given the position. I've called the div, given class of static, and I've given the position of static. That is why on the web page, you can see that it follows the normal flow. So whether or not I add the position static, it's still going to take the normal flow. So let me try to comment this out so you can see what I'm trying to say. So I've commented it out and I'm back here on my page and I'll refresh. Let me go back, refresh, because this is the home page. Go back again. You see that it still follows the normal flow of the page, whether or not I add it. So it really doesn't do anything to the position. All right, let me comment that back. So that's it, representation now in code. Let's look at relative positioning. Like you can see here in this previous illustration that I have. So it's like I'm nudging the layer of your cake a little to the left or right. It keeps its original space, but you can move it around slightly. Let me show you. So look at this cake. You notice that we have different layers of cake, all right? We have one static on the table, and we have other layers of cake notched to the left, some are notched to the right. That's how relative positioning is like. Like I showed you here, you notice that this particular div has been given a position of relative. So this is the original position where the div is supposed to be, or if it's following the normal flow of the web page. But when you set relative to it, it just nudges it a bit away from the original position. I think we should see that in code so that you properly understand. So let's go to our VS Code. I think I have relative somewhere here. So you see that I have given a div class of relative and I've set the position here to relative. Let's go back to our live page and see relative. So you notice that in previously when we saw static, so for static it followed the normal flow of the page. But when you look at relative like nudges it a bit from the normal flow of the page. It appears like it has given it some spacing, all right? So relative position is like nudging it so that it can move a little to the left or a little to the right. In this case, it has moved away from the left. So that is what relative positioning is about. So let's move on. I think we have absolute and fixed. Okay, it gets really interesting here. So absolute positioning is where things get interesting. Imagine floating a cake layer in the air wherever you want. Let me show you. So it makes the cake layer float anywhere. It's attached to a stick, and that stick is like its ancestor. You can see that these cake layers here are kind of away from other layers of this cake. So the cake is like floating in the air wherever you want it to. It positions the element relative to nearest positioned ancestor. If none, it positions relative to document body. You see that analogy in the code that we are trying to. Let's see that in code. So when we navigate away, okay, I already have my web page open. So I'm going to go back and just refresh this. And then I click on absolute. So on absolute, you're going to notice that I have a div that been set to position of relative. And this div that I want to have absolute is inside of this div that its position is set to relative. So what it's going to do is that it's going to position itself relative to the parent or to the nearest positioned ancestor. Let me show you my code. So we have absolute. All right. So right here we have absolute. You know that this is the parent container. Yes, parent container because it's carrying this one, which is its child, and the class have been set to absolute, and we're giving it a position here, giving it a position of absolute. But note that the parent container is having a position of relative. So what's going to happen is the position that this child element is going to take will be relative to the parent container, like what we described using the cake layers. All right. So that's why we have it here positioned relative to the parent. So if we did not have any position relative for this parent, it will shift or take its positioning to the web page relative to the next, like to the parent, to the next ancestor or to the next parent. So if you look at this code here, you notice that if I should take away, like if I should remove this position relative, like I'm not giving any position now to the parent element, you're going to notice a change. and that change will be effective such that it is now relative to the next parent or ancestor. And if you notice, this div, because it will no longer be relative to the parent container, you notice that since it's inside the body and the body represents the web page or the document body, it is going to now be relative to the body. You see what I'm trying to say? Let's go back. So you see how it has changed. So this is the body, and even when you try to inspect, you are going to notice the same thing. So like this is the body of the page, you get the body or the document body. And now this div here, let me see if I can expand this for us to see. So this particular div here, let's open it up. So this is the div. You notice that it is now taking or having its position relative to the document body itself, because this parent container where it was contained does not have a positioning. But if I should give a positioning to this parent here, it will go and take space inside of here. The position will not be relative to the parent container. Do you understand? All right, let's continue. So the next we want to look at is our fixed positioning. Just as you see this lady moving and trying to decorate this cake on a rotating table, and no matter how she turns the table or where she stands or where she stands, the cake will stay in the same spot. All right, so it's like this cake is glued there. It doesn't move with the rest of the cake layers. All right, so the cake is just glued, it doesn't move with the rest of the cake layers. So let's like see it in code, to gain better understanding. So here I will exit this, and we have our fixed positioning, and I have like two divs that I've assigned the value of fixed to their position. So let's look at the code so that you understand more. So here I have like I have this thing going on. So for the first one, I have given it the class of fixed, and I've assigned the position. I've called it, and I've assigned the position fixed to it. So like I said, is not going to move from that position. It is going to remain there no matter how you scroll. Many places that we tend to see some of these examples is probably when you visit a web page. So a good example of fixed position is this web page here. So when I click on inspect, you look at the navbar and you notice that it still maintains its space, or it still maintains, you can see it here. So if I turn it off, you see that things start scattering, or things are not properly aligned. But when I turn position fixed on, you notice how it stays where it is. No matter how I scroll to the end of the page and go back up, it still stays where it is. So like I said before, back again, so no matter how you scroll, that particular div or that element is going to stay in that same spot. It stays in that spot. So it gets more interesting when we see the sticky positioning. All right, so the sticky positioning, now imagine your slice of cake. You have a slice of cake that moves with the rotating table. So when it reaches a particular edge, it just sticks. That no matter how you scroll, it is just going to stay there. We're going to see that in code. So the sticky position is like you are putting a slice of cake on a rotating table. As the table turns, the cake moves with it until it reaches a certain point, then it sticks. It's like the cake knows when to stop moving and stay in place. So let's see that in code. So here in my web page I created, I want to see sticky, and you notice that when I scroll, you notice that initially it's just where it is. It just follows the flow of the page or the position that game. But when I scroll, it sticks at some point. It gets to a point that I've scrolled to some extent, even when I've gone out of the rest of this content that I have here, it now sticks to the edge of my page. Let's look at the code for this sticky. So you notice here that I have some content going on, and inside of here I have a bunch of paragraphs in a particular div. All right, and in another div, and still inside the div, I'm giving it a class, giving a class of sticky, and inside of here I've called that I'm giving it a position here of sticky. Now this particular div is representational of the orange of this orange tab you see here. All right, so this is the div. okay, and rest of the paragraphs of the page. So when I scroll to some extent, because I've given a position of sticky, it is going to just stick to the edge of the page. So that's it for sticky. All right. So practice exercise. You can put all this together and create a fun layout where each element uses a different type of positioning. Practice and have fun with it. Share me your work in the comment section. I really love to see it. And there you have it, a simple and fun way to understand CSS positioning. So play around with this and see how you can make your web pages look even more awesome. Well done. Now you know CSS positioning. You can come join them, have the cake, or keep practicing and experimenting with different position layout. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more coding tutorials. Happy coding. See you in my next video. Bye.